Hey there, guys. My name's Andrew Morrison. For this cultural class, taking this artifact was actually been pretty fun for me here. Uh, I really enjoy superhero movies. Like, superhero movies are my favorite thing. I was into comics when I was in elementary school and middle school, collected all of them, and seeing all of these comics that I read being made into movies is really like nostalgic for me. Movies like the superhero movies have really been taken off, been around for a long time, but they really kind of created their own genre in the early 2000s with Spider-Man and X-Men. And so the cultural artifact that I want us to evaluate today is actually going to be the Avengers Infinity Wars, which has been the most recent video and made this huge impact. If you're in youth ministry like me, you saw what it did. You saw how many people reacted to the video, to the movie. And anytime something's a huge success in pop culture, it creates a meme. So there were tons of memes out everywhere dealing with the Infinity Wars and the moral conflicts and I don't feel very good of Spider-Man and such. Some of the background of what we need to understand of like what the text had been built on was first and foremost around the comics, right? So comics were a media that was kind of created for entertainment, like a book, but also added the pictures to help paint that picture of what they were trying to communicate. In comics, their whole source has always been around the idea of something in this world, similar to this world, but what if scenarios? What if there were superheroes? What if there were aliens? And what would happen? With one of the first ones like Superman, who looked like a man with ordinary abilities, who tried to hide his identity, but actually had these superhero, almost godlike powers. But what was unique about Marvel Comics was that Marvel Comics, their whole background is really about the struggle of what it looks like to be a superhero, their personal life, the struggle of what they have in trying to keep their identity, the moral dilemmas that they have to make and choices, and the consequences that they really have to face up at the end for those choices because of the great power that they have. Everyone's familiar with the Spider-Man, scene of like, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's really a huge concept for Marvel as a whole. It is really showing the humanness and the human side of those comics. Now, in the early 2000s, those movies started growing. In 2008, the Infinity Wars was being built on. And so the Avengers started coming together. We started seeing more of those heroes and little plots and little pieces that started putting together of what this movie was going to be about. And what was really unique with this is getting actually the Ruffalo brothers. And these directors, not a whole lot of experience prior to in the comic industry and dealing with this comic universe. The superhero universe and such. But they had two huge successes with the new Captain America movies of Captain America Winter Soldier and Captain America Civil War. And both of those movies were huge success. And so when they did the Infinity Wars, they really took that what they had been doing with the previous movies and really launching those forward. Now, the Ruffalo brothers also have a huge comic background. And so a lot of their comedy shows, usually TV shows, and what they had been creating were coming about, and they actually weave humor quite a bit into the movies. So they understand the drama, they understand humor, and it really kind of leverage comedy inside of these movies. And we see little glimpses of that throughout the Infinity War movies. Now, each actor also kind of brings their own story as well, and they kind of start implementing in their own take on what the character looks like. So with the foundation of Marvel Comics, and then being built on top of that, the directors, and then from the directors also the actors, we have the authors of this movie and a lot of their backgrounds and what they were kind of creating. So when it comes to actual movie itself, there was a lot of messages that were being delivered. The movie is very, very entertaining, very action oriented, but there's a lot of struggles that we see that these heroes start facing. So first and foremost is that we see really the need of a hero at this point. Thanos has been talked about throughout this whole movie, and when he comes in and just easily crushes two of the strongest Avengers, Thor and Hulk, within the first couple of minutes, you immediately feel the anxiety of like, man, like, yeah, the universe is in trouble at this point. If you got a guy who's this strong who can easily take out these other two, even to the point where Hulk, who's, in this universe, one of the strongest guys out there, won't come out now because of how badly he'd been beaten. And so each character, there's really kind of like three different segments of characters that are kind of introduced with Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and Iron Man as one group, the Guardians of the Galaxy as another group with Thor, and then a final group on Earth with Captain America and his whole crew. So all these guys kind of function together, and we see them all interacting and eventually meet up with each other, but each one of them have their own struggles. With Spider-Man, with Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and Iron Man, each one of these guys have a pride issue. Spider-Man, in his previous movies and even in this movie, takes a lot of risk and a lot of pride in his youthfulness, that he's young, he has this figured out, a lot of that teen angst that we see. And even in the very beginning, he starts putting his life on the edge and risking his life, feeling almost like he's invincible. Doctor Strange has a pride of duty, that he has this duty to protect the world, to protect this stone, and says that, hey, I will sacrifice all of you guys if it means protecting this stone. And then Iron Man has this pride of success. He knows that he's a smart guy. He thinks that he can maneuver and out-tactic Thanos, and actually leads the whole team to go battle Thanos at this point. And the unique thing with that is that each one of those prides leads to their destruction. Spider-Man meets death. Doctor Strange fails in his duty, and Iron Man actually fails leading his team, and it no longer has that success. Now, there's another constant theme that we see throughout this of, sacrificing one in order to save the many. And this has been something that's been discussed a lot. How much are we willing to sacrifice? And so there's really two main characters of Vision, who has one of the stones, and he lives off of that stone. And if that stone got destroyed, all the people would, like, Thanos couldn't destroy the universe, but he would die. But the only one who could kill him is actually his lover, Scarlet Witch. And she's not willing to do that and sees the value in his life, and they try to find every alternative they can. But in the end, there isn't one. And so she's forced to kill him, but she still loses the stone, and Thanos takes it. Now, on the other side, with the Guardians of the Galaxy, they face the same thing, where Gamora knows where one of the stones are located at, and so she makes Star-Lord promise her that, hey, if Thanos captures me, kill me. Don't let this happen. And he says he will, but when he's put on the spot to do it, he can't. He says, I just cannot do this here. And then as a result, not only is the stone revealed, but he also loses Gamora. She dies. And so the idea of, like, that the sacrifice of one to save the many is always a loss situation, that there is no winning at that point. And even Thanos, he has this almost nihilistic idea, that, the world's overpopulated, it needs to be completely taken out and restored. And he's not your typical villain that you love to hate. He's a guy that you kind of wrestle with. You see a lot of his motion. He's very logical. He's very patient, and very smart in his tactics. And even the appeal that he makes of, like, I'm doing this. Some people are getting hurt now, but so that our future can thrive. And it's a similar message that we hear a lot in today's day and age, of making the sacrifice now so that later on others can be taken care of. And so Thanos comes to a point where he also has to make that choice to sacrifice someone he loves in order to carry out his vision. Now, Thanos actually does that, and then we see him actually completing his goal, his objective, in the end. And then at the end, it's his daughter walking with him, being like, what did it take? This vision, and he says, it cost me everything. And so I think there's a few Christian values that we can kind of take away from that, and a few things that we can kind of accept or choose to decline. I think we can accept the prides, that those prides are toxic, that they will destroy us. I think that we can also kind of see the sacrifice and the struggle of what, the sacrifice of one to save many. However, what we actually see is that the sacrifice of one to save many in our faith, that Jesus is the only one who made that sacrifice, and honestly, we're able to see almost the emotional terror of what was actually involved in that. Like, it would be very hard for any of us to be in that situation, but God was in that situation, not only to make the sacrifice for people he didn't know, but people who hated him, people who despised him, and he still followed through and allowed his son to be sacrificed to save the many. And then I think an easy one that we can easily reject is definitely going to be Thanos' idea. That because resources are low, life has to be monitored. And I think this is a popular view among the lines of population control, that we're poisoning the climate, and if we don't take care of this now, that we need to make sure we don't have too many people in one population. The argument for abortion, that they're not wanted and their life isn't going to be of good value anyways because they won't have the resources they need. Even euthanasia, where they're saying that it's okay to euthanize people who are older because what value are they going to add? They're just going to suck up resources. All these place a de-emphasis on the value of life and what we have to offer in life. And I think we need to hold on to the verse of that God created each one of us and sees life as valuable and purposeful. Even if it's a hard life, who are we to try and take that out of God's hands and his sovereign will of what he's wanted to do? So I think there was actually a lot more depth in this movie than I thought, and kind of seeing the messages that were being portrayed. So it's been very interesting. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts.